Game night at my parents' house always looked perfect from the outside. Picture this: mismatched mugs filled with wine, bowls of popcorn that somehow never stayed full, my dad's classic playlist humming from a speaker in the corner, and a stack of brightly colored card games that promised fun for the whole family. Except, we were never really that kind of family. I sat between my mom and my older brother, trying not to tense up every time someone cracked a joke at my expense. My mom always made them sound sweet, like compliments wrapped in passive aggression. "You were such a quiet child," she'd say, nudging my arm like that was some kind of fond memory. I used to think it was. Tonight, we were playing one of those deep question games my cousin brought. Ironic, really, how we could spend decades pretending things were fine and then crack open a game designed to foster intimacy. The first few cards were tame. What's your favorite memory from childhood? Describe your perfect day. Laughter echoed through the kitchen, glasses clinked, and I forced myself to smile so hard it hurt. I caught my dad's eye across the table. He nodded approvingly, like he always did when I managed to not embarrass him by being too sensitive or too serious. I used to take his approval like a sip of cold water. Briefly refreshing, never enough. Then my brother pulled the next card. He grinned. "All right, this one's spicy. What's your biggest regret?" He looked around the table like he was about to start a fire and couldn't wait to see who'd get burned. Everyone started laughing and groaning, brushing it off like it was too deep for tonight. Someone made a joke about regretting eating the extra slice of cake. Someone else said marrying too young, but they were joking too. I felt the question settle on my chest like a weight, and even though it hadn't been directed at me, every pair of eyes eventually turned my way. I think they expected something light, maybe a comment about not studying abroad when I had the chance, or dating that guy in college they never liked. But the truth was so much heavier. And for once, I didn't feel like making them comfortable. I looked around the table, at the people who taught me how to tie my shoes, but never how to trust myself. The ones who clapped for me when I did what they wanted, and went silent when I didn't. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind they were used to. That moment, suspended in the awkward buzz of half laughter and too much wine, was the beginning. I didn't know yet that it would change everything. But I did know that, for the first time, I wasn't going to bite my tongue to protect their version of me. I could feel their anticipation like static in the air, just waiting for me to play along. Give them the safe answer, the sweet version, the edited version. But I was tired of being the family's soft landing. I set my glass down, folded my hands in my lap, and said it, clear and steady. My biggest regret, letting you convince me I wasn't enough. The words didn't explode. They just hung there, still and sharp, like the eye of a storm. Mum blinked. My dad shifted in his seat. My brother let out a small, uncomfortable laugh, probably hoping I'd follow it up with a joke, but I didn't. No one spoke. Not right away. I think they were trying to work out if I was being serious or dramatic. Maybe both. I let the silence stretch. I wanted it to sting. My mum recovered first, as always. "What on earth is that supposed to mean?" Her voice was calm, controlled. Too calm. It was her defense mechanism. Pretend confusion. Feigned innocence. I looked right at her. "It means exactly what it sounds like." "Come on, don't be ridiculous," my dad muttered. "You've always been enough. More than enough. We've always supported you." The way he said always made me want to laugh. Like I should have been grateful for the scraps of affection handed out only when I played by their rules. Really? When I applied to art school and you said it was a waste of time? When I cried in the car after that career fair and Mum said, "Well, maybe you're not cut out for anything too ambitious"? When I got promoted and none of you even asked what it meant? "I didn't realize you were still holding on to all that," Mum said, her tone sharper now, eyes narrowing just enough for me to notice. "Yeah, that's kind of the point." It was like I'd pulled a thread and the whole tapestry of their self-image started to unravel. I didn't enjoy it. This wasn't some revenge fantasy, but I also wasn't going to pretend it hadn't happened, just so they could feel better about who they were. My brother cleared his throat. "Look, I think maybe you're reading too much into stuff. Everyone says things they don't mean, sometimes. Except I remember everything, I said, because I had to. Because I had to collect the pieces to make sense of why I always felt small. I stood up slowly, and all I could think was how loud my heartbeat felt. I'm going to head out. What now? Mom asked, stunned. Yeah, before I start regretting this moment too. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, my hands steady in a way that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. The cold hit me as soon as I stepped outside, but it felt good. Cleansing almost, like the air was washing off the heaviness from inside. I didn't look back at the house. I knew what I'd see. The familiar glow of the kitchen, my family still sitting in stunned silence. Probably blaming my reaction on something they could control, stress, hormones, maybe even the wine. But it wasn't sudden. This had been brewing for years. I didn't get in my car right away. I walked down the block, letting my heels click against the pavement, each step helping me breathe a little easier. There was a park at the end of the street, just a patch of grass and a few swings, but it was quiet, safe. I sat on the bench where I used to wait for the school bus, back when I thought my parents knew everything. The silence wrapped around me, and for a second, I let myself feel it all. The years of biting my tongue, of shrinking to fit their expectations, of being told I was sensitive, dramatic, too much, always too much of something, never quite the right thing. I remembered the time I came home crying after my first heartbreak, and my mom said, "You need to toughen up. Life doesn't care about your feelings." No hug, no kindness, just a lesson in resilience disguised as love. Or the time I got the lead in the school play, and my dad asked, "So what's the point of that? You think that's a career now?" Or when I got my first apartment and they said, "It's a bit small, isn't it?" Not, "We're proud of you," just another subtle reminder that nothing I did ever quite measured up. But the worst moments weren't the ones where they said the wrong thing. It was the things they didn't say, the praise they withheld, the comfort they couldn't give, the way they only celebrated me when I mirrored what they understood. That bench felt like a time capsule, like I was sitting beside all the versions of myself that had swallowed their words and stayed quiet. Tonight, I broke that silence. And yeah, it hurt, but it also felt like the beginning of something new, something mine. My phone buzzed, a text from my brother. "Are you okay?" That was intense. I stared at the screen for a while. I didn't know how to answer. Was I okay? No, not really. But I was free. And for once, that felt like enough. I typed back, "Yeah, I needed to say it." He didn't reply right. Away. Maybe he was still sitting at the table, still trying to understand what just happened. Maybe they all were. I didn't care. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even have a plan for where I'd sleep, which, looking back, is very on brand for me. React first, deal with logistics later. But I couldn't walk back into that house. Not after what I said, not after what they didn't say back. So, I drove. Nowhere specific. Just aimless turns through familiar streets, passing old hangouts, old memories, each one whispering pieces of the story I had tried to rewrite so many times. You know that thing we do, where we convince ourselves it wasn't that bad? That our parents did the best they could? That love just looked different in our house? Yeah, I told myself that, too, for years, until the lie got too heavy to carry. At a red light, I found myself rewatching it in my head. Game night. The ridiculous plastic buzzers, the smell of pizza and scented candles, my dad rolling his eyes at my mom's dramatic reading of the cards, my brother laughing too loud. It was all so perfectly normal until it wasn't. What's your biggest regret? It was like the universe was teeing me up, and I didn't hesitate. That's what keeps replaying. I didn't even flinch. Letting you convince me I wasn't enough. I said it with a smile, a full, calm, eye contact smile, like it was a toast at a wedding, not a Molotov cocktail tossed into a house full of emotional landmines. And then I stood up and left. Who does that? Apparently, I do. Eventually, I parked outside a hotel, one of those places that's trying really hard to be trendy with warm lighting and plants that somehow thrive without sunlight. I booked one night with the last bit of savings in my account and stepped into a room that smelled like eucalyptus and quiet. Alone, I sank onto the bed, the silence wrapping around me like a question. Now what? I didn't cry. I thought I might. But I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how long I've been someone's daughter first and myself second. That night, I scrolled through my photos. Graduation, birthdays, vacations. My smile got better at hiding things over the years. But if you looked closely, you could see it. The slight tension in my jaw, the polite curve of my lips, the eyes that always looked like they were searching for something that wasn't in the frame. I stopped at one photo. Me, age 8, in a glittery princess dress, grinning ear to ear. No filters, no performance, just joy. I stared at that kid for a long time. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because I let them make her forget that she was. I woke up with my shoes still on and my phone on 12%. Apparently charging devices wasn't a priority after publicly detonating my childhood trauma. I didn't feel regret exactly. More like exposure. Raw skin under clothes, like I'd been scraped open by my own truth. I checked my notifications. 15 missed calls, 3 voicemails, 6 texts, none from my mom, none from my dad. All from my brother. I listened to one voicemail, and honestly, it was almost sweet. "Hey, not sure where you are, but that was... wow. Just call me when you can, okay? I just want to make sure you're safe." That was his thing. Never diving into the deep end, just treading water near it, hoping no one noticed how tired he was. He was the golden child, the mediator, the one who kept peace like it was a full-time job. He didn't agree with half of what our parents did, but he never challenged them either. And I used to resent that. But now, I just feel sorry for him. Living. Your life on mute is a kind of death, too. I showered, got dressed in yesterday's jeans and a hotel robe that looked better than anything I owned. Then I made the terrible decision to check Facebook. And there it was. A post. From my mom. A cryptic, emotionally manipulative paragraph about some people forgetting where they came from, and how no matter what you do for your children, they'll never appreciate the sacrifices. Topped off with a Bible verse, naturally. There were comments, of course, her friends chiming in, saying how strong she is, how children today have no respect, how she deserves better. I wasn't tagged, but I didn't need to be. That post had my name all over it. And for a second, I almost responded. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something savage, something final. But then I stopped, because that's what she wanted. A reaction, a public display, a way to control the narrative. And I was done giving her the last word. Instead, I posted a photo of that same picture I found the night before. The one of me at 8, dressed like a princess, laughing like joy was my birthright. No caption. Just the image. Let people interpret it however they wanted. I knew what it meant. It was a reminder, a promise, that I was reclaiming her. This little girl who hadn't yet learned how to apologize for existing. I packed my things, checked out, and walked outside into a gray, indifferent morning. I didn't have a plan. Still don't, really. But I knew I couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because some houses are just well-decorated cages, and some escapes don't look like fleeing. They look like finally choosing yourself. I didn't expect silence to make so much noise. By midday, I was getting pings every 5 minutes. Texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, a passive-aggressive just checking in from my aunt, and the dreaded group chat going off like a fire alarm. The chat was called Fam Bam because, of course it was, a name cheerful enough to distract from the tension it buried. My mom had already weaponized it, posting a long message about how we all have to love each other through the hard times, and even Jesus was betrayed by those closest to him. I didn't reply. I just read, watched, observed the subtle, shifting of allegiances, the coded language, the not-so-veiled barbs. I knew their tactics. Guilt by emoji, blame in Bible quotes, affection followed by a slap. Then came my brother's message. I think we all need to take a breath. She said something real. Maybe we should be asking why it hurt so much instead of pretending it didn't. I stared at the screen. My brother. Speaking up. I didn't know whether to cry or buy him a drink. Of course, the silence that followed. His message was louder than anything else. No one wanted to challenge him, but no one dared back him either. And that's the thing about family. Sometimes loyalty is just a fear of being the next target. He texted me privately a minute later. Liam, you okay? Me. No? But that feels like a win somehow. Liam, you really meant what you said? Me. I've never meant anything more. He didn't reply straight away. When he did, it was just one sentence. Liam. Good. Then maybe you're finally living. I closed my phone. I sat there, alone in the corner of a cafe that didn't ask me for a family tree to justify my presence. I ordered a flat white. I added cinnamon on top just because I could. And I took a photo of it, half because it looked good, half because I finally had a moment worth remembering. No drama, no parents, no fake smiles, just a cup of coffee and the quiet echo of self-worth growing louder. I thought about going back to the house to collect the rest of my things, but the idea made my stomach turn. The idea of standing in that space, in that kitchen where so many invisible bruises had formed, felt suffocating. Maybe Liam could grab them, or maybe I didn't need any of it. Maybe leaving your life behind isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's spring cleaning. I sipped my drink. I watched strangers laugh. I wondered if they also had families who only knew how to love you in pieces. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I just existed. And that was enough. I woke up the next morning in a bed that wasn't mine, under a duvet that smelled like fabric softener and fresh starts. I was crashing at my friend Nia's flat, small, slightly chaotic, and filled with the kind of warmth that didn't ask for anything in return. She'd opened the door last night without a single question. Just pulled me in, handed me a blanket, and let me be quiet. That kind of friendship should be bottled. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind doing that thing where it replays every awkward moment from the past 24 hours, like it's trying to make me regret them. But this time, there was nothing to regret. Just truths I'd left on the table, finally said out loud. I checked my phone, more missed calls from Mum. 3 voice notes, a flurry of messages that swung between worried, outraged, and weirdly performative, like she was trying to prove something to some invisible jury. Call me now. This is not how families fix things. Everyone's asking what happened. I don't know what to tell them. I didn't reply. I didn't owe her damage control. Scrolling through, her messages felt like looking at someone else's life. Like I was flicking through a script I no longer wanted to act in. I used to be her puppet, nodding when she needed me to, staying quiet when it mattered most. But yesterday, I cut the strings. I didn't feel heroic. I felt tired, but I also felt free. Nia walked into the room holding 2 mugs, 1 coffee, 1 tea, because she never remembered which I preferred. You look like someone who could use both, she said. I look like someone who could use a reset button. She sat down next to me. You know, when you said it, at game night, I wanted to clap, but I didn't want to be the one person clapping at a funeral. I laughed. Properly, for the first time in days. I was scared, I admitted. Not just of what I was saying, but of who I'd be once I said it. And now? Still scared, but there's a weird calm in it. She nodded, sipping from her mystery mug. That's because you finally stopped asking for permission to feel how you feel. It sounded so simple, but when you grow up in a house where feelings are only allowed if they're pretty, permission becomes currency. I pulled the duvet tighter around me and let the silence stretch. Not heavy this time, just gentle, honest. I didn't know what came next. but I knew it wouldn't involve groveling or going back to old roles just because it kept the peace. I was done performing for people who couldn't clap for me. And that felt like progress. The following days were a strange mixture of relief and confrontation. I still hadn't called Mom, and every time my phone buzzed with her name, I felt my pulse quicken, like a warning light flashing in my chest. But I didn't answer. Not then, not yet. I wasn't ready to explain myself, to apologize for something I wasn't sorry for. The silence between us grew, stretching thin and tight, until I started to feel it in my bones. Every time I saw something that reminded me of home, of Mom or Dad, there was a quiet ache, a yearning that threatened to unravel all my good intentions. I didn't talk to Nia about it. I couldn't. She didn't need to hear me going back and forth, looking for someone to validate my decision. I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't know how to do it yet. Then came the phone call, the one I knew was coming, but had been dreading anyway. It was Dad. "Hi, love. It's Dad." I didn't answer immediately. I didn't know how to. "I saw your post. Your mom's been really upset," he said, his voice soft but heavy with a mix of concern and disappointment. "We need to talk about this. You can't just walk away from your family like this." I bit my lip. The last thing I wanted was to have this conversation with him. Not now. Not like this. "I didn't walk away," I said, my voice steady, even though the words tasted foreign. "I stopped letting you convince me I wasn't enough." There was a long pause. I could practically hear him thinking, trying to find the right words. I didn't need him to fix it. I didn't need him to defend Mom. I just needed him to hear me. "You can't talk to your mom like that," he said, his tone now shifting into something more defensive. "She's your mother." I felt the familiar frustration building, rising up like a tide. "I've been talking to her like that for years, and you've let it happen. Both of you have." He didn't respond to that. I wanted him to argue. I wanted him to tell me I was wrong, that I was being selfish, but he didn't. Instead, there was silence again. Thick, heavy silence. "I'm not asking for permission," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I'm asking you to stop pretending like everything's fine when it's not. I don't know how to fix this," he admitted finally, "but I'll try. We'll try." His words stung, but in a different way than I expected. It wasn't anger that gripped me this time, just a deep, aching sadness. Maybe I'd been asking for more than they could give me. Maybe I'd been expecting them to be something they couldn't be. "I don't need fixing," I said softly. "I just need you to let me go." And for the first time, I meant it. I didn't expect Dad to call back so quickly. But a few hours later, the phone buzzed again, this time with Mom's name flashing across the screen. I hesitated. I'd been avoiding her calls for days, unsure of what I was supposed to say. What could I say that wouldn't make her defensive? What could I say that would matter now? I stared at her name for a long time before answering. "Mom?" Her voice cracked immediately. "I'm sorry, darling. I never wanted to make you feel like you weren't enough." The apology was barely a whisper, and yet it hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't the apology I'd been waiting for, but maybe it was the one I needed. "I know," I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. "But it's not just about the words, is it? It's the way things have always been. It's the way you made me feel like I was never quite what you wanted, like I was always just not enough." I could hear her crying on the other end of the line. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I've always loved you, but I never knew how to show it properly. You've always been so independent, so strong. I didn't know how to reach you," was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd ever heard from her. But even in the rawness of it, something in me recoiled. I'd spent my whole life hearing her justify herself, excusing the things that had hurt me, trying to paint over the cracks, with half-hearted attempts at love. "I don't need you to explain, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need you to understand that I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, as though she was weighing my words, trying to find the right ones to undo the damage. "No," she said quietly. And I don't want you to stay if it means losing yourself. But I don't know how to fix us." "You don't have to," I replied. "I've already done it. And for the first time in my life, I truly believed that." I hung up the phone, the weight of the conversation sinking in. There was relief, yes, but also a gnawing ache that hadn't been there before. Maybe I'd given her too much credit for thinking she could change, or maybe I'd underestimated the weight of the words I'd just said. The phone buzzed again. Dad's name lit up the screen this time. My stomach twisted. I wasn't ready for this. I took a deep breath and answered. "Yeah, he didn't waste any time. I don't know what you think you're doing, but I'm not going to sit by and watch you tear this family apart." I let his words hang in the air for a moment before speaking. "You never did sit by, did you? You just stood there, watching. Mom and me play these endless games. You never took the time to really see me, Dad." I heard him sigh on the other end. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple." I didn't care anymore if my words hurt him, because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. His voice dropped. "You're just throwing everything away. You think leaving will fix this? You think cutting us off will make everything better?" I swallowed hard, my hands gripping the phone tight. "I don't know if it'll fix anything, but I know I can't stay. I can't keep being the person I am when I'm around you two." He didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I thought he might just hang up. But then I heard the quiet words that I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get this way." The apology felt hollow, just like Mum's. I'd heard those words before, often enough to know they didn't mean change. They meant guilt. It wasn't about me. It was about them. "I know you're sorry, but that doesn't fix everything, Dad." "I know." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to fix it either." "I think it's too late for that." The silence stretched between us until he finally spoke again. I just don't want to lose you." I closed my eyes, wishing I could offer him something more than this. "I'm not the one leaving, Dad. You've been gone for years." And with that, I ended the call, the familiar feeling of abandonment rising again, but this time with an edge of finality. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was done pretending. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted after that conversation. A knot had loosened in my chest, but there was still that lingering uncertainty, that feeling of being on the edge of something I wasn't quite ready for. It was as if I had just taken one last step toward the unknown, and there was no going back. I stared out the window, watching the sunset behind the city skyline. The colors in the sky were vibrant, fiery even, and it almost felt like a sign. I was standing on the edge of something new. But was it better? Was it enough? A few moments passed before my phone buzzed again. A message from my best friend Emily. I hadn't told her about the call yet. I didn't want to bring it up, not yet. But she had a way of reading me, even over text. "Are you okay? You've been quiet." I tapped a response, then stared at it, for a moment before hitting send. "I don't know. I think I just lost something I didn't know I needed." It was the truth, in a way, but it wasn't the whole truth, because while I might have lost something, I was also gaining something. I just didn't know what it was yet. "Talk to me. Call me when you're ready." I exhaled slowly, grateful for her patience. But the truth was, I wasn't ready. Not yet. I still had too many thoughts swirling around in my mind to make sense of anything. I turned away from the window and sank onto the couch, staring at the empty space in front of me. It should have been comforting, this stillness, but it wasn't. There was too much noise in my head, too many things left unsaid. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. I almost didn't open it, but something in me knew I needed to. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier. Maybe it's time for you to stop living for everyone else. You deserve to make your own choices, to find your own way." Her words cut through the fog of my thoughts. She was right, of course. I had been living for everyone else, for my parents, for their expectations, for their approval. But now, it was time to live for me, I felt my breath catch in my throat, the weight of the decision settling in. This wasn't just about walking away from them, it was about walking towards something new, something better. It felt like the first real choice I'd made in years. The evening had drawn in completely, and the room felt colder now, the silence hanging heavier. I had moved to the kitchen to make myself some tea, but I wasn't really focused on the process. The kettle clicked off, and I poured the hot water into a mug without really looking at it, still lost in my thoughts. I couldn't help but think back to all the moments that had led to this one. My parents weren't bad people. They'd given me everything they thought I needed, everything they could offer. But their love had always come with strings attached, always conditioned on how well I could meet their expectations. I stirred the tea aimlessly, watching the steam rise, but it didn't seem to calm anything inside me. I thought of all those years of trying to prove myself, of waiting for the approval that would never come. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, just trying to make them proud, to make them see me as more than their disappointment. When I was younger, I used to think I could earn their love. If I was good enough, if I kept my grades up, if I followed the path they'd set for me, if I just tried harder, I'd be worthy of their affection. But the truth was, no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. There was always more to prove, always a higher bar to reach. As I stood there holding the mug in my hands, it struck me that I had spent so many years running in circles, waiting for validation that would never come. And maybe, just maybe, I had to stop expecting them to give me something they didn't have to offer. The thought stung, but it also brought a sense of clarity. My parents had their own version of love, their own way of showing it, and it wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their limitations. That's the hardest part to accept, isn't it? That sometimes the love you get is not the love you need. I took a slow sip of the tea, letting the warmth spread through me. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that message from myself. But now, as much as I wanted to stay buried in my own self-reflection, I knew I couldn't stay here forever. There was a world outside that I hadn't touched in years, and it was time to start living in it, on my own terms. I set the mug down, wiping the back of my hand across my face, as though to wipe away the last of the doubts. Tomorrow, I would start fresh. Tomorrow, I would reclaim my life. I spent the night in my room, just staring at the walls. The quiet was almost deafening, but it gave me space to think, to feel what I needed to feel. I wasn't ready to face my parents yet, not when the words I had said were still echoing in my head. They hadn't even tried to stop me when I left. The thought made my chest tighten. I'd left because I needed to, but the weight of it, the decision to walk away from everything I'd known for so long, felt like a hammer to the heart. It wasn't just a moment of anger, it was a long-buried frustration finally coming to the surface. I didn't regret what I had said, but I regretted how much I'd held inside for years. I got out of bed and paced around the room, stopping by the window to look out. The night was still, and everything felt like it was in stasis. The world was moving, but I wasn't sure where it was going anymore. The life I'd lived up to this point had felt like a script someone else had written for me. And now, I was trying to figure out what my own story would look like. I knew I couldn't just disappear. It wasn't in me, but I didn't know how to confront them. Not yet. Not until I had figured out what it was that I wanted from them, or if I even needed anything from them anymore. I glanced at my phone, but I didn't check it. I couldn't bring myself to. I knew they were probably trying to call or text, but what could I say? There were no simple words to fix this, no easy apology for what had been left unsaid for years. I lay back down on the bed, my eyes tracing, the patterns of the ceiling as though they held the answers to the questions spinning in my head. Was it possible to rebuild from this? Or had I crossed a line that could never be uncrossed? A part of me wondered if they'd ever understand, but I couldn't let that fear stop me from moving forward. I had spent far too long waiting for their approval, and if they couldn't accept me as I was, then maybe it was time for me to start, truly accepting myself. I reached for my phone, finally unlocking it and staring at the screen. There were missed calls, texts, messages that I wasn't ready to open yet. Not today. I put the phone back down and turned off the light. Tomorrow, I would face them. But not today. The morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. I could hear the muffled sound of my parents talking downstairs, their voices too close for comfort, too far for conversation. I stayed in bed longer than I should have, pretending to sleep, my mind still tangled in the mess I had made the night before. I knew I had to face them eventually. There was no running away from it. But how do you have a conversation about something you've been avoiding for years? I didn't have the answers. All I had was the weight of those words, the sting of leaving, and the fear that it would never be enough to change what had been broken. I got up slowly, pushing aside the blankets, as though moving too quickly would somehow make everything worse. I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, the same reflection I'd seen for years. But today it felt different. There was something in my eyes, something that had shifted overnight. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had spoken the truth last night, but that truth had a cost. The words had cut deep, and now I wasn't sure if there was any going back. Downstairs I could hear them still talking. My father's voice was low, but my mother's was sharp, and I could tell from the tone that they were discussing me. There was no way to avoid it now. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the messages I had ignored all night. My mother had texted, "We need to talk. Please don't do this." I read it over and over, the words settling deep into my chest. I wasn't sure if I could do what she wanted. Could I just pick up the pieces and pretend nothing had happened? I glanced at the clock. It was now or never. I couldn't hide in this room forever, not when the world outside was moving forward without me. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and walked out the door. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and I could see my mother standing by the counter, her back to me, as my father leaned against the sink, arms crossed. They looked like a team, united against something, or maybe against me. They both turned when they heard me. I met their eyes, but neither of them spoke right away. They didn't know where to start. Neither did I. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. I didn't want to wait for her to say something she'd regret, so I took a step forward. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady even though my hands trembled. And with that, the silence between us deepened, more telling than any words could be. I could feel the tension in the room like a physical thing, thick and suffocating. It made it hard to breathe, but I wasn't going to let it stop me. I had said what I needed to say last night, and now it was time to face the consequences. There was no running from this, no more hiding behind silence or pretending it wasn't happening. My mother finally spoke, her voice tight, barely above a whisper. "What did you mean by that? By what you said last night?" Her words hit me like a slap, but I wasn't backing down now. I could feel my heart pounding, a raw truth bubbling up that I hadn't been able to express for years. I looked at her and said the words I never thought I would say. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough, Mom. For so long, I wasn't enough for you." She flinched, and for a moment I thought I saw something like regret in her eyes. But then it disappeared, replaced by a hardness I recognized all too well. My father shifted his weight, trying to ease the tension, but his silence spoke volumes. He had always been the quiet one, the one who never stepped in, never said what needed to be said. I felt the anger rise in me again, that familiar burn in my chest, the kind of frustration I couldn't shake no matter how hard I tried. "You remember the times when I needed you?" I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "Do you remember how often I turned to you, hoping for something, anything, to make me feel like I mattered? But you weren't there. Not really. I had to fight for your attention, fight for your approval, and even when I got it, it never felt like enough." My mother's face flushed red, her eyes narrowing as she crossed her arms in defense. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I'm not finished," I said, my voice harder now, more sure of itself. "I'm tired of pretending everything's fine, that I don't carry the weight of this. You may have thought you were doing what was best for me, but all I've ever wanted was to feel like I was enough." There I had said it. The truth was out in the open, raw and vulnerable, but it was out. It was a relief, but it also stung, like tearing off a bandage that had been stuck for too long. My father finally spoke, his voice surprisingly calm. "You think we didn't try? We've always done what we thought was best for you." I looked at him, unable to hold back the bitterness. "You think I don't know that? You think I didn't see you both try, but still somehow fall short? Every single time?" The words were out now, and they hung in the air between us, too heavy to ignore. There was no going back. I had said my piece, and now I just had to live with it. The silence that followed was thick, unbearable. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to say more, waiting for me to crack. But I wasn't going to. Not this time. I had done the hardest part. I had spoken the truth. Now, all I could do was wait for their response. The silence stretched on, so long and heavy that it felt like a living thing, pressing down on us all. My parents looked at each other, but neither of them spoke. It was like they were waiting for the other to react, to take responsibility for the mess we were in. I couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. "Why didn't you ever tell me how you felt?" My mother's voice broke through the silence, softer now, but still carrying that defensive edge. "We've always tried, you know. I've always been there for you, in my way." I shook my head, unable to hold back the bitterness. "You were there in your way, yeah, but it wasn't the way I needed." The words slipped out before I could stop them. I regretted them the second they left my mouth, but I couldn't take them back now. I was always walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect for you, trying to fit into the mold you wanted me to be in. But I never felt like I could be enough. And I kept trying, Mom. I kept trying to prove I was worthy, but you never saw me. Not really. My voice broke a little on the last part, the hurt coming through despite myself. She didn't respond immediately, but I could see the change in her expression. For the first time in a long time, she looked vulnerable, unsure of herself. It was a look I had never seen from her before. My dad looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something like understanding in his eyes. He cleared his throat, as if trying to bring some semblance of normalcy back into the room. "I didn't know you felt that way," he said quietly. "If we'd known, we would have..." "Would have what?" I cut him off, the frustration rising again. "Would have done what, exactly? Told me I was good enough for a moment and then left me to figure the rest out on my own? I don't need that anymore, Dad. I've had to figure it out by myself for years." His shoulders sagged as though my words had physically drained him. My mother, too, looked tired, like all the weight of our unspoken issues had finally caught up with her. But I couldn't be the one to carry it anymore. Not for them, not when I'd carried it for so long. "I'm not trying to hurt you," I added, softer now, my words a little more measured. "But I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I can't keep pretending I don't feel invisible in this family." There it was again. The truth, ugly and painful, spilling out in ways I never expected. But I wasn't sorry for it. I wasn't sorry for needing to be seen, for wanting to be enough for once. The room felt colder now, the air thicker. My parents still didn't speak, but the tension between us had shifted. The walls between us were finally starting to come down. It wasn't fixed, it wasn't over. But something had broken, something that might have been buried for years. And in that brokenness, there was room to rebuild. And that thought, no matter how small or fragile, gave me hope. The silence hung over us for a few moments longer before my mother finally spoke. Her voice was tight, like she was holding back a flood of emotions she hadn't yet figured out how to express. I didn't know you felt so alone," she said, her eyes distant. "I thought I was doing what was best. I thought I was protecting you." "I know you did," I replied quietly, trying to soften the words as they left my mouth. "But sometimes, doing what's best isn't the same as doing what's right. You were protecting me from things that didn't need to be protected from. You were protecting me from myself." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the edges of her sleeve. "I never meant for you to feel like that. I never meant for you to think you weren't enough." My heart ached, but I knew better than to let it all consume me. I'd spent too long being consumed by it. I couldn't keep going in circles. I couldn't keep waiting for them to finally see me. I had to see myself first. "You weren't the problem, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I was the problem. I let you convince me I wasn't enough. I let you convince me I wasn't worthy of love unless I fit into a mold you created. And I've spent so long trying to change myself to fit that mold. But I can't anymore." My mother's face softened, though there was still a trace of guilt in her expression. "I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll try." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Trying is all I've ever wanted, but I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can stay in this place where I feel like I'm invisible." My father finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "We've failed you, haven't we?" There was no anger, no defensive tone in his words, just acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement of everything we'd all been too afraid to face. Nodded slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to have this conversation. I didn't want to feel this exposed. But I knew this was the only way to move forward, for all of us. "We've all been running from something," I said, taking a deep breath, "but I can't keep running anymore. Not from myself, not from you." The words hung in the air, charged with a weight that felt almost unbearable. I knew there was no magic fix, no quick resolution that would erase the hurt, the years of neglect and misunderstanding. But somehow, in this moment, I felt like I had finally said what I needed to say. "I need space," I added quietly, looking from one to the other. "I need to find myself again, to figure out who I am without all the baggage of trying to meet everyone else's expectations." My parents both nodded, their eyes sad but resigned. They understood. And maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to accept that the only way to truly heal was for me to walk away from the things that had been holding me back. "I'll be all right," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "I just need to figure it out on my own." They didn't stop me as I got up from the table. My feet felt heavy, like I was walking through thick mud, but I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. Not now. I'd said what needed to be said. I'd drawn the line. Now, I just had to live with it. It was strange, walking out the door without glancing back. For so long, I'd imagined that moment, when I'd finally had enough, when I'd had the courage to leave. In my head, it was supposed to feel like some sort of triumph, like a victory, like I was setting myself free. But in reality, it felt like nothing. Like I was walking away from everything and everyone I'd ever known. And for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was the right choice. I took a deep breath as I stood on the porch, the night air cool against my skin. I didn't have a plan. No direction. I didn't know where I was going or what came next, and I hated the uncertainty. But it was the kind of uncertainty I'd never allowed myself before. It was the kind of uncertainty that felt like freedom. I had to believe it would get better. I had to believe that stepping away would be the first step toward healing, toward finally living for myself. The next few days were a blur. I rented a small place on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy, just a quiet apartment that felt far removed from the life I had known. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The walls felt like they were breathing with me, not holding me in. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed that space, that room to breathe, to be alone without anyone trying to define who I was. I started slowly, finding pieces of myself that had been buried under years of expectations. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but I was finally doing the work. A week later, I received a message from my mother. I wasn't sure if I should open it at first. I was afraid of the same patterns repeating. But I opened it anyway. "I'm sorry," it read. "I want to understand. I want to be there for you. Whenever you're ready to talk." I didn't reply right away. I sat with the message for a while, wondering if I was ready to let her back in. The old me would have rushed to respond, to make everything right, to try to fix the damage we'd caused. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to rush this. I was going to take my time, to choose my path my way. Eventually, I texted back. Simple, Honest. I'm taking it one day at a time. I'll let you know when I'm ready. I didn't know what the future would bring. I didn't know what kind of relationship I'd have with my parents, or if I'd even have a relationship with them at all. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control. And that, in itself, was enough.